Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are recording.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Good evening, everyone. I call the regular council meeting of Monday, June 7th to order. And before we continue with our agenda, I would like to ask that council and staff, and if anyone out there is a visitor, to adhere to a moment or a minute of silence in recognition of not only the 250 children that were uncovered at the Kamloops Residential School, but those as well across our country that could be in the number of 1,000 to 3,000. They were taken from their families. They never returned. So we recognize the heartfelt concerns and feelings and horror that their families, as well as what do you call it, the survivors that have come back, of which we have many in our community. And I'd like our council to give a minute's silence for that recognition. Thank you, council and staff. Mr. Taylor will move to item 2, public input. The meeting is open to statements no more than 5 members of the public of no more than 2 minutes in length each.
There's no one to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any late additions or deletions for the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Late item needs to be added as 8.1 under business arising from the minutes. The title is Use COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant to Reduce Obstacles to Development and Economic Recovery. And the CAO will speak to that item.
That's 8.1?
That's 8.1.
All right, when we get there, you can explain the title again. Thank you. Any other late additions or deletions?
None, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Okay, council, I need a motion that the June 7th, 2021 regular council meeting agenda as amended be adopted. Who moves? Councillor Wiebe, second. Councillor Howe. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. We moved to item 4.1, which is considered the special discussion, obviously related to the tragic events that have been uncovered in the past week and a bit. And I want to thank Councillor Leach and the other councillors that followed in terms of asking what we can and what we should do in terms of a call to action for the support of our Northern Statland First Nations people, communities, as well as obviously the rest of the First Nations across the country. I think I would like that every councillor has an opportunity to express themselves. I would like for us to be able to derive a resolution or a call to action. However, I personally feel we've got to be cautious and that we don't step over the top or ahead of our First Nations neighbors and communities, and it should be of a very supportive nature. But obviously, each one of us as individuals has an expression, I'm sure, that we want to participate. I'm happy with the fact that in my discussions with Councillor Leach and the others, that with the CAO, we were able to determine that we could formulate that resolution today rather than looking at a notice of motion and having to wait an extra 2 weeks. So from my perspective, I really feel, obviously, we've let folks down. It's a natural tendency. I mean, you look at my age, I've been knowing that this situation has been ongoing for a number of years and years. And when it doesn't reach the top of news cycles, or it doesn't get pushed forward in terms of in front of our face with all the busy lives that we do have a tendency, I don't necessarily think forget, but we certainly overlook, and we get jarred when things happen to recognize it. And I feel that there's a lot of culpability. You know, we each can feel a bit of personal responsibility because we didn't pursue anything or we didn't give action. But in its own sense, I think when we support our fellow First Nations in our communities, it at least is accomplishing something in that regard, but it obviously allows steps that should be taken that aren't taken, whether it be by our federal government or provincial government or the various religious organizations, and particularly the Catholic religion. I just want to make a comment. I find it a bit distasteful, and again, you know, it well to the top because of the findings that came there, but we have our own federal government that's so willing to put, you know, 25 million and 60 million into Palestinians in Gaza at the drop of a hat, but yet will drag on negotiations with our survivors year after year after year. It's got to tell me something. What the heck is going on here? And I feel, from a personal note, I will be contacting our MP and expressing that, and that as much as the I shouldn't say feign, but you have this clucking by our various leaders and politicians, and I don't want to be part of one of them. I want us to do something meaningful and be supportive, but and recognize that, you know, we may have failed a little bit by not pursuing it at a higher level, but then we look to our leaders for that too. And as I say, I just find it unforgivable that the federal government can drop money all around the world, but not look after our own fellow people, especially in our own community. From the Catholic Church side, you saw that the Pope has still not apologized. From my point of view, obviously, at this late a date, the apology doesn't matter. It's what the heck are you going to do? And certainly, again, in terms of reparations for survivors and the families that have lost the children, and the terrible afflictions that they experienced throughout their lifetime, what is going to be done? I think it should be noted, especially since I've got 4 female counselors here. Are you aware that the Pope has excommunicated every single female bishop, cardinal, priest? I just found that it never hit the you know, the news media. So that tells you something, obviously. And I was a Catholic at one time, except not practicing, but I certainly don't have a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings when you look at what our Western-based religions have done to our Aboriginals all around the world, as a matter of fact. But we're here, we're living and working and playing with our fellow First Nations neighbors, and I feel we have to support them, and we shouldn't let this thing go. I was fortunate enough to, I shouldn't say fortunate, I was there in Zimbabwe, right on the edge of South Africa, when apartheid stopped. And they had Truth and Reconciliation, and it was led by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And I can tell you, it was very unique in terms of it was live, and it lived it every day. In the news cycles, it never dropped for over a year and a half, and people had to come forward and be questioned and to either accept responsibility or prove that they were not. And that did a lot in terms of bringing the country together a bit more, with an understanding of how abhorrent the apartheid was, and the atrocities that happened and were recognized, and people that were responsible for them actually sincerely apologize. And the whole country, in fact, that whole sub-Saharan Africa was daily, all day long on television, exposed to that kind of thing. That gives you the experience, really. But to have a reconciliation process that sits off somewhere and is not in front of the face of us, the population, doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. And I really hope that this process now, based on these findings, we're going to really do something serious, and all of us, including our government and religious organizations, will accept responsibility and work together for reparations and move forward. That's my feeling on it, folks. I really want to hear from each one of you. And what I will do is together, and it will take a bit of time, but I know Mr. Denegar has said that Mr. Taylor will help us formulate the resolution if you guys are okay with it, and that we can put one together and pass it tonight, so that we feel that we've expressed ourselves, and not hopefully, but we do something that's very supportive, especially for our local First Nations neighbors. That's my piece, folks. Who would like to speak next? Councillor Hoppel.
Thank you. This is another heart-wrenching part of our history, and I just cannot begin to imagine the pain and suffering inflicted on those families. The parents, the children, the sisters, the brothers, the entire families. And I pray that somewhere above, that those children are in a happier place than the last place they had on earth. I hope to see the Catholic Church, the provincial and federal governments be fully transparent with the archives and the school records of all the residential students. And I think those need to be turned over to the Indigenous people and the families of those 215 children. Thank you for giving me this moment to share. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoppel. Councillor Leach.
Thanks. I have a couple of different points that hopefully staff can bring into a motion, but I'm going to start by saying, because it's been repeated a lot, this is not history. This is ongoing. This is continually happening. Just because the residential schools have closed, the harm that's done is still continuing. I'm going to start with this. Sorry, I've got a bunch of notes, so bear with me here because it's been a rough couple of weeks. The effects of this is ongoing, and as a Caucasian female who grew up in this community and went to school here, I had zero education on what had gone on. Yet I lived through my adolescence not understanding why there was a lot of pain in our Indigenous community, and that pain trickled over into racial tensions when I was in high school. When I was in grade 9, a local artist, Saul Terry, painted the mural that is currently on the Lillooet Secondary School, and I publicly wrote a letter to the Bridge River Lillooet News as a letter to the editor, not understanding why that mural was put up and why in his speech the mural purely depicted Indigenous symbols, and he said that this mural was for all of us. I did not understand at 14 years old because I had zero education on it. And that continued over to boil in. And also, I'm going to note that the school district 74 at that time and the teachers at that time had no resources or education to explain to the entire high school population why that mural was put on the school. Within a month or 2 months, another student went down with white paint and wrote "White Pride" twice on that mural. And then for the rest of the trajectory that I was in high school here, there was ongoing, under the scenes, comments of white pride, native pride, and it ruined friendships. And I don't think that this community understands what has gone on, has affected them, and is affecting them. I don't need to get into the opioid crisis here. I don't need to get into the low-income stuff. All of these larger problems, if you look at it closely, comes from hurt and pain. And hurt people hurt people. That is an old adage. We hear it all the time. And we live in a community that is hurting. And this has completely ripped open seams. So on that, I want to apologize to Saul Terry for my letter to the editor from 15, almost 20 years ago when that was done up. I understand what he was doing, the statement that he was making, and the education he was trying to bring in. And I can appreciate that now. And I am heartbroken that at that time, I actually was praised for speaking out as a student at the school because of that. And with that, one of the notices to motion that I'd like staff to bring in is, we already know that the BC education system is slowly bringing in Indigenous education, but I think at a federal level, we need to make them aware that this needs to come in as a federal mandate. Alberta is currently, with Jason Kenney as premier, trying to take out bits of Indigenous history out of their history and social studies textbooks so the students don't learn. We cannot let that happen. There's a lot that I also eventually want to say. I'm going to actually scrap what I had planned because I think that there's going to be a lot of politicians and a lot of people, demanding things happen from the Catholic Church, the federal government, the provincial government, all of that. But I know we here at this table are committed to making change. We've been fighting for that. Our staff know that that's where our values lay. And I think that our neighbors know that, and they know that we are trying. Because in this little discovery of just this one school, 6 of those 17 communities affected are our neighbors. I know that provincially, communities are going to be looking at us to see what our next move is. And so I really think that although we don't know how to go forward with reconciliation, even following the 94 calls to action, I want us to remember that we are going to be in the limelight here, and we need to be smart about our next moves. But I also think that although none of us here at this table signed up when we ran for election to deal with COVID, and we certainly didn't sign up to deal with something of this nature, I do believe that the right people are sitting at this table to go forward with this and try and undo some of the harm that's done. That's all I've got for right now, because I need a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. I'm going to come back around to everyone in case there's some points that you've forgotten that you want to make. So it's good to take a rest. Next, please. Councillor Wiebe.
Hopefully I can get through this without, I didn't make any notes because I just wanted to speak from my own personal feelings and emotions. And since this came into play, it's been like an open raw wound to me. I am not a residential school survivor, but I am an abuse survivor. And for those that say they need to get over it, I can tell you that I have dealt with this every day of my life, and I am still not over it. And I don't know when I will be over it. I know the two fellow councillors that sat in the resiliency workshop with me have seen a change in me over the last week to 10 days. I'm very vulnerable. I feel like an open wound. And I really don't think truth and reconciliation, I'm so sick of hearing that truth and reconciliation is all about the money. There is no amount of money to get beyond this, or to pay someone for lost children, or just the historical families that have been ripped apart due to this, not knowing how to be parents, how to raise their kids, how to get out of the addictions and the hurt and I think somewhere in our resolution, it has to be about the truth. The truth is so much more important than anything else on this table right now. The truth needs to be told. People need to be exposed, and we need to accept the people in our community. There is not one person at Downton Park that was born going, I want to be an addict. I want to be an alcoholic. I want to hurt people. I want to abuse my family. There is not one, and we need to look at people with compassion and emotion and open our hearts. And I think we as a council and a town need to make a stand. I'm not for 215 hours at half-mast. I'm like, that just annoys me. I'm like, if that was my daughter and you're going to give me 1 hour, are you kidding me? I just think that that's just wrong. I think that flag should be at half-mast until there becomes a truth and reconciliation actually happening. I am so angry, and for those that sit here and say I didn't know, everybody knew. Everybody knew about abuse taking place in someone's private home, to abuse taking place on the reserves, to the reserves that don't have fresh water, to foster care and where these children are taken, and the kids that are lost in foster care. Everybody knew, including those sitting here at this table, and nobody did anything. And I don't want to follow along with what the province or the federal government tells us to do. We are a unique community, and we need to set the standards, and we need them to look at us and say, look what Lillooet is doing for their neighbors. These people, I don't even know how to express myself. My husband works for the Bridge River Indian Band, and he has never worked for a company that looked at him as a person. He was always a truck number. It's exactly what he was. And I used to say to him, you put all these miles in on that highway, and when you die on that road, The only ones that are going to be there that care are going to be your family, because all the company's going to do is look for another truck. You know, when I fell and I broke my back, Bridge River Indian Band was at my door. They were at my door with a care package, you know, slippers, nighties. Oh, I can't even tell you what it meant. I've never had that happen to me. I had 2 knee surgeries when he worked at Associated Grocers and never got so much as a card or a phone call. And even with what's going on right now in Kamloops, these people are gracious to us. They are gracious to us. They are not blaming us for what happened in the past. All they want is the truth to be told. And I would like that somehow to be our responsibility, and to take that responsibility on. I just, like I say, this resiliency workshop that we're doing, and then the finding of these kids, and it just opened up so much in me. It was just like all the abuse to me happened yesterday. So I can't even imagine what it's doing to these communities. I cannot imagine what it's doing to them. And a lot of them can't go over there. They can't look at that school. They can't make it down the road. They can't, whatever. And I think we need to listen. I don't think we need to ask them what they would like us to do. I think we need to make a stand and open our hearts and open our minds and open whatever we have to open, and lobby somewhere for this to go forward where the truth comes out. The truth is the only thing that is going to help anybody heal. And I don't know, maybe I'll have more to say later, but that's about it.
Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. I mean, just to confirm, I'm sure people are aware, the word reparations is not solely a financial thing. It addresses each one of your councillors that you've talked about right now, everything from truth, facts, files, education, a commitment to understanding, a commitment to truth and reconciliation. Reparations means that you sit down and say, I got to listen to you, and I've got to do what I can to make it right. So I just wanted to clarify that. At least that's how that word sits with me. So. Councillor Howe?
Thank you for sharing. This has been really difficult. I find myself coming in and out of anger and frustration, a lot of anger and frustration. We grew up in this community, and I just keep hearing things that people would say, white people in our community would say about Indigenous people, the words used to describe them. Oh, there goes just awful, awful things. And man, I remember my grade 12 class, we were maybe unusually cohesive. We all, we all hung out together. We all went and celebrated together. I think it was 75 of us that graduated, and we were all up at the same campsite, celebrating together. And then I hear, Councillor Leach's experience, and I'm going like, holy crap, I had left for college by then, but what the heck? So I'm really angry, and I'm really frustrated because for so long, we've known about this. People have known about this. Our grandparents have known about this. And yet it has to take, for some strange reason, it has to take a media shit show for people to go, oh, this is like real. This is devastating. There's like a whole bunch of people that are really hurting from this. And it frustrates me because it's something that we've known about for so long. Why does it take that for people to go, oh, I can connect and resonate with this? Why is this being left to us too? Like it's beautiful, and I'm glad that it is. And like Councillor Leach says, I think we have the right people at the table start moving ahead with some of this reconciling and truth. But I think a part of that truth is our truth. We have got to start expressing our own, being honest with ourselves, with what, where our own biases lay, listening to other people in the community, and when they speak from a bias, addressing it, not harshly calling them out, but hey, did you know? And bringing them into a level of knowing. Like I think about the truth and reconciliation process, and UNDRIP, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People came out of that. And I keep thinking this was a resolution. It's not even binding by law. And isn't it frickin' sad that in order to build truth and reconciliation, we're being asked to recognize Indigenous people as human beings? That's where we've got. That's where we've gotten to in our society. I mean, when if we haven't yet read, and it's new as we go along, and we open our spheres of understanding, and we go, geez, things aren't quite right, and we start listening to our guts, and we start listening to the people around us, and we go, oh, there's so much more to this, and participating and actively learning. And I mean, when I moved here, I was introduced to some really, really important people that, to me, that helped encourage me on that educational growth process and better understanding how Canada came to be. And man, the Doctrine of Discovery, guys, I don't know if you've read this thing, but inside the Doctrine of Discovery, it speaks to Terra Nullius. So Terra Nullius is what the discoverers and what the monarchy deemed, that it basically deemed North America as uninhabited. There's no life, Terra Nullius, no life. And every single system we have built since then has been based on there having been no life. So when you think about what you can do to a human being when you reduce them to nothing, it explains everything. And when we look at the systems in place right now that we live and breathe, we as a council represent it. We represent the systems, and now here we sit, and it's almost like it's gonna take us to fight from the belly of the beast to make the changes necessary. And I just keep thinking, it's so sad what happened. It's horrifying what happened in the residential schools, but that's not where it ends. Like, as it was said, this is just one limb, one branch of what has been going on and will continue to go on until we're ready to make some changes. And when I look at one of the calls to action is number 43, and it asks, we're being called to action as municipalities, as municipal leaders, to use UNDRIP or DRIP as the framework for the truth and reconciliation process. It's been clearly laid out for us what we can do. And so I really hope that we pay as much attention to all of the calls of action and pay attention and really put our efforts towards our own personal learning, but also whatever it's going to take to help our community learn as well. Resources, providing resources, educational resources, because the change is only going to come when people have a certain level of understanding of how things have come to be. I have so much more to say, but I'm just gonna stop now.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Howe. You can take a rest. If you have more to say, we would all like to hear it. I really appreciate everyone's passion, their honesty, and their emotion. And it makes me feel, I'm happy that Councillor Dietz says that this is the group I think that we can strive forward in picking up our socks from the history that has been going on to this day. And just makes me proud to be part of this group. And we will do something unique and significant. Councillor Howe, I won't address, I've done it with you directly in terms of UNDRIP. And if there were the first two letters weren't in there, obviously we utilize what's good in any document. And what I like is what I hear from you guys, especially from Councillor Wiebe, that we can do our thing our way in our area to have the greatest impact in terms of our fellow communities, our fellow First Nation communities. Anybody have anything else they want to add? Councillor Leach?
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to add, now that I've calmed down a little bit, that in this program that the three of us are taking right now, we've been able to connect with other people in different municipalities in BC, Alberta, and actually there's one lady out in California as well. And we've actually been having a discussion about this. It actually kind of came right as the news broke, right when we were doing emotional awareness. Through some of the conversations, I think, Barb, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you've talked to her a couple of times, but Mayor Wickenstrom from, is it Port McNeill? I think she's the mayor from. She sits as an executive on UBCM, and she, on our last class, made a note that at the UBCM level, with President Frankel, they are having these conversations, the same conversations that we're having here right now. And she says they're working on something more to bring. So I feel like we're not gonna be alone in this, and we will have some resources as we move forward. She did talk about the C2C funding, which we've taken advantage of a couple of times, but I think it sounds like they're going to be expanding on that as well. So I don't want the pressure to feel like it's all us. We're going to have resources and support. I know that, whether it is on a provincial or federal level, but at least on the UBCM level, which is something that we can really utilize and our staff can utilize as well. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else want to contribute more? Councillor Howe?
Going forward, I would really, I think it would be a really great start for us to have a committee of the whole regarding the calls to action and how they apply, what we can do, as Councillor Wiebe had said, and I think very wisely, is that we are a municipality. We don't need to wait for the provincial and federal governments to tell us what to do next. It's laid out for us, literally laid out for us. And now we just need to have a conversation, or the beginning of multiple conversations around what that looks like for us. How do we start to embark on these? You know, we have call to action 40, 43, 47, 57, and 75. That's 5. 5 really great steps that have already been highly discussed and been like, here's your here's a call to action. Guys, could you do this? This would be really helpful to help us, to help you and us with truth and reconciliation. And I think that it would be helpful for us to have huge conversations about what these could look like. Because I think all of us have some really great ideas and some really great visions. And I think that meaningful conversations where we sit and we really speak from the heart on these is going to be important. Because if we can do that, if we can speak from the heart and have those conversations, then I think we're better equipped then to come to the table to have further discussions in other arenas. But we're the leaders, and I'm excited about that. Scared, but excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. No, I don't think any one of us are waiting for the province or for the federal government to tell us what to do, but I do feel it's incumbent upon us to tell them what we want them to do, at least at a certain level. And I think your points in terms of call to action are obviously that's what we want to achieve, but I really feel that we have to engage our local Statmik First Nations community so that there's buy-in there in terms of number one, we got a lot of listening to do. We're listening to ourselves. We've got a lot of passion and a lot of interest. And what I like is I believe the energy is going to be there to move things forward. But I do feel we have to engage on a local level. And this is what I'm hearing from you folk in anything that we do. And we can then we can achieve some things that matter to us locally. It's difficult, obviously, on a global basis, or the Pope in the Vatican and our Prime Minister in Ottawa and the Premier in Victoria. But we should gang together with the rest of the community, say enough. We want you to sit down and get things done. But we in the interim, which is what I like from all 5 of us there, is that we're prepared to deal locally with our local Statlium groups, and let's get some meaningful things done. I like what I'm hearing. And still open for anyone else, but I hope I'm Mr. Taylor, may you assist us with at least initiating a resolution that can reflect, at least from a general sense, and obviously we can build on that. And if there's an appetite by council for a committee of the whole, obviously we can get into a lot more detail. And do you have something that you can put forth? And as I said, councillors, we are willing to listen more if anybody wants to contribute or say things. There it looks. Mr. Taylor's been working on it. So I think this is something that we can refine, guys. So let's read it and see if any of the changes or nuances that we want to make. I've read it through. Mr. Denigar, are we any closer to a C-to-C meeting, community to a community meeting? Obviously, that's a good time when the whole of council can express themselves and assure that the support comes from all of our council.
There is funding available again from UBCM for this. The earliest we would be able to do it would be sometime this coming fall, but they do have funding going into next year as well. So there's a few intakes, but we haven't initiated the conversations yet other than to check in with a few of our neighbors. And the feedback is that we have to sort of re-examine it a little bit later in the year due to COVID and everything else going on. But we are staying on top of it.
Thank you. But I think I just detect myself as well as the rest of council here. We want to initiate something a little sooner than the fall, but it doesn't necessarily only have to be the mayor that does it. I think each individual councillor can engage and express themselves and speak for all of us, because we've essentially listened to each other. I'm not one that's heavy on structure. I just like things smooth and rolling and making progress. What do you say, council?
Barb here, Mayor Bussey. Before this was headline news, it had been discussed at an SLRD meeting not to do a formal community to community. It was discussed to do a informal, when the time is right and the restrictions are off, like an informal picnic at a campground, or just everybody getting to know everybody on a personal level, instead of, with an agenda and speakers and this, that, and the other, but just a really informal getting to know the people at their table and at our table and at the SLRD table and just all around the community. And I personally think that that's a great idea. I know that the different bands do that within their own community. They have community dinners once a month, where their band members are there and this, that, and the other. And my husband and I have been invited to them. I think it needs to start right now on a more informal level. There's just too much emotion and too much pain and just too much afterthought. I really like the non-formal thing, informal thing.
No, that's a good point, Councillor. I agree with you that anytime I've attended a function, obviously, especially the drumming on significant days, the various attendees tell stories of their experiences, and I think they're most valuable. A couple of them are very hard-hitting. I do know, and I was just listening to you folk here tonight, and I do myself have some significant stories to share in terms of with each other. I like that idea around a campfire. Obviously, how do you say it? The smaller or the less cumbersome group there is, the more impact there is. But it's certainly something we should look at. I'm fully in favor of that. Around a campfire, and each of us has the opportunity to share our stories and to listen to everyone else's stories. Good idea. Councillor Leach, you're.
No, I just wanted to say that I like what's written before us. I think it's, at this time, it's encompassed what we've said tonight.
Okay. Any other input from other councillors? There being none, Councillor Hoffel, is she there?
It appears that Councillor Hopful lost her connection. She'll be back presently.
Okay. I'd like to have her back when we do. Oh, okay. Councillor Howell, go ahead.
Just a question for clarification, because this is written very high level, and because we're speaking from more of a heart space right now. I'm curious when we say, and that to further that, the mayor will reach out to the leadership of our neighboring northern Stadtlimit limit communities to confirm the district council's commitment to support their community members in this difficult time. I'm kind of a details girl, so what would that look like? I just want to make sure that I would like to hear from you what that looks like.
Sorry, Councillor, is that directed to staff or the mayor?
I can
To
say,
whom-
I
Yeah.
can say from my perspective, and then obviously staff can have input and the other councillors as well. I mean, at this particular point in time, as you say, there's a lot of call to actions. I'm personally a bit loath to jump on that right now until we've heard. It's something I feel we should have in general discussion. I kind of like the way that Councillor Wiebe has said, you know, first of all, I think it's just a matter of getting together and listening to each other, and then opening the door after that to sit down to work on something that's near and dear to their hearts as well as our hearts, that we both as groups know is going to benefit our community. So from my perspective at this point in time, it's just a matter of say, listen, we recognize this, we're serious about it, we want to support you, we want to contribute, and we want to engage to the point of having a significant impact on our communities, meaning theirs and ours. I believe anything more than that, we've got to engage on a more direct level. That's just what I feel now. Mr. Taylor, how do you see it, Mr. Deniger? And other councillors comment on it too, please.
I'll defer to the CAO on this matter.
Okay, so I do think dealing at a more personal level with our neighboring community leaders does make perfect sense. A C2C is a very organized structure, and it has a reporting requirement to UBCM. I don't think we need to go that far right now. And different communities and different leaders within these communities are going to be feeling very different as individual people about how this has affected them and how it's specific to their community. So I see this as a very thoughtful, stepwise approach. Makes sense. First, just reach out very personally and build from that based on the feedback you're hearing. It's about listening, right? So to come in with big, bold ideas of what we're going to propose and how we're going to work together and how we're going to support, that's not listening, right? So it does make sense to me. What I'm hearing from council is it's thoughtful, it's sensitive, it's empathetic. I think it is the right approach.
Yeah, and from that, yeah, from that perspective, obviously, I think in terms of me reaching out will be a lot of listening and coming back to council in terms of, okay, we've heard what they said. That doesn't preclude you individual councillors from engaging on your own level with especially with people that you know and familiar with. And then we come back together and say, okay, this is what we've heard. I feel only after that will we be able to really come and put something concrete together, but we've got to do that, I believe, side by side. So that's how I feel. Councillor Howell, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I just it seemed within that there was potentially some ideas of what we might be able to offer, and I thought, okay, well, I just wanted to make sure we were sort of on the same page, and then what that might look like, and if there was, you know, maybe that would create a space for further conversation and idea gathering. So this is good. Thank you.
Okay. Is Councillor Hoffel back yet?
she hasn't seemed to be able to reconnect yet. CAO, could you please reach out?
And anyone else to make comments? So Councillor Hopful hasn't read this then, or able to make comment, or at least vote on it. Any further input from you three councillors there? Councillor Weeb?
Yeah, I feel like I'm being dominant here. I think just by doing the impersonal reaching out and making friendships and opening our hearts and being kind and opening our ears and listening, that the more direct things will come as far as how we support their community. I think we will just know that. I think we're compassionate enough people sitting here that we will just know what to do. I really believe that.
Thank you, Councillor Weeb. This is so important. I'm a bit loath to go ahead without Councillor Hoffel, but we can't sit and wait. I was going to recommend that we have a 5-minute bio break after this before going into the next part of the agenda. Unless, Mr. Denegar, should I probably do that now? We have a 5-minute break and hope that Councillor Hoffel can make it back. And then
Yeah, we could certainly take a break. I've received a text message from Councillor Hoffel that she's trying to reconnect, but so far unsuccessful.
Right.
So maybe a little break, we'll try to get her back on.
Okay, 5-minute break, folks, and then we'll come back. Thank you so much for your input so far and the passion in which you have to carry this forward. We will do good things with our communities. Yes, Councillor Weeb, go ahead.
Oh, there she is. I was just going to say, can we screenshot it and send it to her?
Okay, Councillor Hoppel, can you hear us?
Yeah, you guys all froze and I was the only one moving around, and yeah, that was really weird. Okay.
Can you read the screenshot here?
Yes, can you just give me 1 minute, please?
We sure will. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I would like to see us use whatever power we have to make sure that, like I said, the Catholic Church, the federal, the provincial governments turn over the archives and school records that they have been asking for years. If they are out there and they exist, they need to be turned over. It's really important.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I believe, yeah, that obviously that'll be part of the next steps we'll have with them as well, with our local First Nations communities. And I'm sure they want to take the lead in that, and we will do whatever as a council to support it. But that's good. So we can build that into to turn over all records related.
Sorry, Councillor Hoffel, could you please help me finish this phrase?
Just all the records. I just want the Catholic Church, the provincial, federal governments to be fully transparent with the archives and the school records of all the residential students to the Indigenous people and those and their families. That we support that, or I don't know. I just know that I heard that, it's something that they've been asking for a long time and many years, and they've never been heard. So whatever support that we can offer them, I think that's important to do so.
Oh, perfect. Kevin is adding it in there. I was just going to say, and the Catholic Church, because I think some of them
Yes,
reside in the
to be
churches.
fully
Yeah.
transparent. Yes, thank you.
If I could say fully transparent with any and all records.
Yes.
Good. Okay, council, how do you sit with this? Any more comments, questions, queries, inputs? Okay. Mr. Taylor, may I proceed?
At your pleasure, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, thank you, council. With this, we have resolved, whereas knowing the truth is necessary first step on the path to healing, and the District of Lillooet will be leaders in supporting and listening to our neighbors. Now therefore be it resolved that the District of Lillooet Council is saddened to hear of the discovery in the area around Kamloops Residential School and will follow the lead of our neighbors, the Northern Statmik, in how we, in accordance with the traditions and values of the Northern Statmik, can honor the victims of the recent horrific discovery and support their families, their survivors, and the communities, should it be? And that any action the district takes in relation to this tragedy will be with blessing of the Northern Statmik leadership and will strive in the spirit of truth and reconciliation to advance our understanding and bring about change. And that the District of Lillooet calls on the federal and provincial governments to mandate Indigenous history as requirements of each provincial school curriculum for public and independent schools, initiate a public awareness campaign, and provide the necessary resources to support this on a continuing basis. And that the District of Lillooet calls on the federal and provincial governments and the Catholic Church to be fully transparent with any and all records related to residential schools with Indigenous communities and families of residential school survivors. And further, that the mayor will reach out to the leadership of our neighboring Northern Statmik communities to confirm the district's council's commitment to listen and support their community members in this difficult time. Who will move? Councillor Wiebe, second Councillor Leach. Any further comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much, council. Good work, well done, and thank you, staff. Okay, 5-minute break and we'll be back. Thank you so much. See you in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are recording.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, and thank you, council, for input on item 4.1. I think it's very significant, and together as a group, we will do good things for this community and for their communities. Thank you again. We'll move on to item 5, delegation. Any delegations, Mr. Taylor?
None today, Mr. Mayor.
And no public and statutory hearings?
None.
We'll move to item 7.1. Adoption of council meeting minutes. Who will move that the May 17th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes be adopted? Councillor Wiebe, second Councillor Howe. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Item 8.1, business arising from the minutes. I've got one word here. It says used. If Mr. Deniger could please expand on that, that would be most appreciated.
Thank you. I'll read the title. We should have put the title in the agenda, but we missed it. It's Use COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant to Reduce Obstacles to Development and Economic Recovery. This was actually an item that council discussed at the May 17th closed session at the end of the regular meeting. And so the resolution included a clause in it that that resolution that was made in a closed session would now come out and become public at this meeting. It's just so that we could have time to discuss it without a pressure at that closed meeting. So the resolution the council adopted, so you don't need to do anything with it, I'll just read it out and then it will be in the minutes, is that a new position of planning and technician clerk be funded from the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant for the remainder of 2021, and that the 2021 financial plan be amended to include this allocation of funds, and further that this resolution be included for public release in the June 7th, 2021 regular meeting of council, which is right now. So it is now released to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Then there's no need for further discussion by us?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Denegar. Thank you, council. No rise and report. We'll move to item 10, that correspondence. Any councillor want to see an item of the correspondence removed? They're seeing none. I will request that the correspondence included in the staff report dated May 31st, 2021 be received for information. Who moves? Councillor Howe, second Councillor Leach. Call the question. All those in favor? Okay. Councillor Hoffel, thank you. Item 12, 12.1, pool leak update.
Thank you. So Bain Gare is not able to make it. He's on a scheduled vacation. She's scheduled, I believe, months ago. So hopefully all the information that council needs is in this report, because there's not a ton more I know beyond what's in here, but it's a pretty thorough report. We have some good news about some findings for the leak detection. We had leak seekers come in, and the fellow donned a dry suit and took down a bottle of special ink and squirted it all around at the valves and intakes around the pool, and discovered that it seems to be that the majority of the leaking is actually occurring between the concrete shell of the pool and the pipes that are supposed to intake the water. So there's a little gap between them that's formed. It's a 30-some-year-old pool, so it's not completely unexpected. But we were finally able to define it. And that's why it was always challenging during the troubleshooting that staff were doing, is that the water kept dropping even when the plugs were plugged. But of course, the water was running in parallel to the pipes. Fortunately, one of the district staff is actually experienced in repairs of concrete finishing. So they'll be attempting the repairs under the guidance of an engineer in town here who's already volunteered a lot of time for us, thankfully. But he'll be working together to find ways to rebuild those seals between the pipes and the concrete surface, and then retest the pool. And if the water doesn't disappear as quickly as it has been, we'll hopefully caught the majority of the leaking. A little leaking is normal for something this age, but if we can bring it down significantly, it means the pool will retain its water and will hopefully be safer and last longer. Then the other issue is, how long has this been going on and what are the effects of this high volume of leakage? This is something for council to really just discuss and figure out your comfort level with the risks. So it could be that it's been leaking badly for 20 years and has just been dissipating into the soils of the area. And that's why the hillsides down here in the VLA are nice and green. And maybe that's okay, but we don't know. So the engineer who's been in town and knows this facility was offering to do a quick and dirty test of the grounds to provide a geotechnical assessment. It's unknown at this point if what their work is that they're proposing will actually be sufficient. They don't even know. But for the quoted price there, I think it's about just under $9,000. They'll be able to figure out, hopefully, that the soils can handle this level of leakage and it's not causing any damage underneath the building or potentially going to be a flood risk for neighboring properties. If they find through that they can't make a determination, though, then they would have to come back with a full-blown study, which means drilling boreholes directly around the building. There's no right answer to it. The engineers themselves, it's kind of guesswork at this point. They don't know what they don't know until they try. So the risk is we do nothing and hope that a sinkhole doesn't form and a flood doesn't occur. Maybe we know the soils enough here are fine that it's not an issue. Maybe they can do a preliminary study and give us some level of confidence that it's not a risk, especially if we're now stopping the leakage of water. Shouldn't get any worse. Or do we pull out all the stops and do a full-blown engineering test for $80,000 to $90,000 to confirm absolutely that the risk is minimal? So I'll do this.
Thank you, Mr. Denner. Before I go to you, Councillor Leach, I just want to make mention, I am not in favor of issuing any amount of money, especially $50,000 to West Trek for technical. I think they did a real flub on our diversion that caused us great angst. And our Mountain View Road, we had to pay $1.3 million. I feel that we can do a lot locally, and I'm happy that we're using local people, local contractors, and there are other geotechnical services beside West Trek. I am very mistrustful of them. And if you open the door, $50,000, they're going to use it. But that's my opinion. Councillor Leach, go ahead.
There was, I apologize because I cannot recall the year, but above the rec center on 9th Avenue, because there's water lines that come down 9th into a well, is there not? Into the neighboring property to the rec center and into the parking lot? Okay, that area flooded. I mean, because it was a big joke in the newspaper at one point, like that we had a river down Main Street. At that point, was there not some studies done? Like, does anybody have any recollection of this? No.
No, I just, from my perspective, I remember seeing the little boat on the side of the road, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's a well there. Those soils are, again, I can offer an opinion.
Well, and there was
the
entire rec center parking lot flooded at one point very recently. So I'm just wondering if we have, or if staff have, if we have records of those, and if we've looked at those recently, and just to jog any memory of, I don't know, because maybe there's a water stream that all of that water went to at one point, because it obviously didn't flood onto the tracks and into the VLA, it went somewhere. So I'm just wondering if there wasn't a report back then done that we could bring forward and maybe like compare, contrast, or get some more information from.
Got it. So that's a good point. And also don't forget Town Creek goes right through there underneath there as well. So sorry, Mr. Danegard, didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries. It's your meeting. I'm just the guest. So in discussions with Bain, that didn't come up, that there might be any studies related to that, but we'll certainly look. And that would be one of the first things any engineering firm would ask us, is any records we have to help them do the job quicker. They did have an awareness of the well, and that was actually triggering that. The awareness of the well is what triggered them to think that based on the soil samples that were done for the well, that might be sufficient information to do this quick assessment without having to do boreholes. Because if the soil is common enough throughout the area, that sample data, which is available to us, might be useful. And to the mayor's point regarding whether it's West Trek or any other geotechnical company, staff have no great opinion on which company we go with at this point. This is just a proposal. We could go out to an RFP or competitive bidding process with any engineering firm who has expertise in this. Because we're aiming to stop the leak, at least mostly, I don't think that this is just my opinion, that there's not any huge urgency of having this geotech do it before another geotech. If we're waiting 3 weeks or 4 weeks, it's not going to be a make or break to what they're going to find. And I think we'll be able to still do it within the deadline of trying to open up in September.
Thank you, Mr. Deniger. I agree, and I think Councillor Leach makes a good point. There are some reports there. And the exciting news is that, and I personally feel that, and we talked about it the last time, that there's a workaround, and the workaround is we can pull the piping up the surface. Doesn't matter if it looks good or doesn't look good, but we can get the pool going, and the pool will last another couple of years until we're able to determine a way on which we can get a new one. So, I mean, that's exciting news. So, okay, next, Councillor Hopful.
Thank you, Mr. Deniger. Right above the hospital there, is there a diversion right there going up to the property towards 9th Street and the Heights? Like there's right where you go into the back of the hospital, that's where all the district trucks drive up, and there is that. Isn't it a diversion because of that actual underwater or underground spring? Because I know the spring runs right behind the hospital and always has in the back parking lot as well.
Yeah, that is my understanding, that the district at some point undergrounded a stream which was coming from a water source. So it is part of the watershed.
And I believe that property right, adjacent to the rec center that Councillor Leach is talking about, that's always had underground or a spring running through it or whatever. It's always had water in it. But how would we determine if that was creek water or pool water? Like, are we taking, if we're looking at back in the mountain going down towards VLA, how would we determine where that was coming from?
My understanding of what the engineers were looking at was the soil's capacity to take the extra volume of water that the pool's leaking, not about any existing water source that's natural. So it's about these 2,500 gallons extra. Could that be absorbed by the soil? So they'll obviously take into account other sources that are coming in from Town Creek, which is, I believe, the water source you're speaking of. So they would look at the volume that is providing to the area as well as the pool. And if the soils can handle it all, then we're fine.
I think.
And lastly, I think, you know what? I always go back to, we need to plant weeping willow trees. We live in a mountainous area with, with obvious water issues. When we plant weeping willow trees, those roots go right down. They grow straight down. They suck up a ton of water, and they could anchor our mountains as we and just secure the soil within them. I don't know. I think that we should really look at that. Anyways, I'm not for at this time spending the $50,000 quite yet. So.
Anything else from council? I'm of the same mind. I feel confident the soils there will handle just about anything. Plus, we can do what we need to do for determination pretty much locally with our people. The last time West Trek was involved in this, if you can remember, we condemned 2 houses and sent notices around to a multitude of homes down in Conway Park. How did that turn out? And basically it was a diversion that was intentionally done. So the soils here, I'm confident. I've checked with a lot of people, and obviously we got to listen to staff because ultimately they have that responsibility, as do we. But to give a consultant group like West Trek a $50,000 opening, forget it. That's from my opinion. I won't vote. I won't support it. I won't vote for it. So, okay, Councillor Howe first, then Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you. Okay, so I understand this correctly. It sounds like some are not in favor of releasing the 50,000 right now, and rather, I just want to make sure I fully understand. We're looking at potentially just waiting until the samples come back to figure out whether or not we want to then have a conversation about releasing 50K for the core samples that might be needed in the future, should the existing samples not come back with accurate information?
Yeah, that's correct. So council adopted a resolution at the previous meeting. Seems like it was just last week, releasing $15,000 to do all the studies and repair work related to the pool. And the leak seekers came in way under what we expected. They were very quickly able to identify the leak, which left us with a bunch of money, which in itself, what council's already allocated, can fund the quick assessment that we're looking at doing with the existing records and the soil samples from the well near the rec center. So that wouldn't require the 50,000. The risk is that we could spend $8,900 for this desktop assessment of the soils and the result being indeterminate. And then the engineers would come back and go, well, now we need to spend up to $50,000 to do borehole drilling around the pool to really be certain. So there's a risk there.
And that's what a consultant company will do. That's how they market themselves. Councillor Howe, anything else?
Yes, so I trust Mayor Vesey's vast experience in when he speaks from that. But that being said, I mean, I'm not willing to negate the potential need for those. I would still like to wait and see what comes from the initial sampling, but perhaps the company, as Mayor Vesey has spoken to, has caused some challenges in the past for this community. Perhaps we could look at looking at a different company as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Wiebe.
Well, I'm amazed at the memory of Mayor Vesey. I recognized that name when I was reading my agenda and did not put two and two together. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward and being transparent about all the history that the town has had with that company. I'm very much in favor of let's get the pool up and running, and whatever's been going on with the water down 9th and from the hospital, and that's been going on for years. I remember Mr. Fowler putting that water wheel in there, and like you say, it, you know, the little boat with the fishing pole, and it did make the front page of the paper, and you know, it kept our community alive. I wish he was still here. He had a great sense of humor. And worry about the testing if we foresee a problem. I'm very much like, why would we spend money to fix something that isn't broken as far as we know? So, but kudos to you for bringing it forward, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. Any other comments, questions? I got to check and see what the appetite is for council. We've got a recommendation that staff report outlining the latest efforts to address leaks in the rec center swimming pool dated June 3rd to be received for information. I would assume none of us have a problem with that. The exciting part is I personally see, hey, we've got a pool for the next 3 years, which I was hoping for, that, you know, with some good luck and intensity, we'll be able to get a new pool, because there's no doubt parts of that rec center and the pool are coming to an end of life. And I just had my fingers crossed when we were discussing that before in terms of how bad the leak was and the like. And when I heard what they were looking at, as I said, don't lose heart. We can do a workaround, and definitely they can do a workaround. Won't look pretty because we'll put the pipes on the top, but bloody heck, we got a pool, and that's the main thing, so that we don't devastate the swims group and have their chins dragging on the ground. That would hurt our community intensely, and I'm really pleased it's gone that way. Now, from the other part, if council wants to take this whole recommendation, I'm suggesting that do an amendment, but it's been put forward and we can vote on the whole thing, but I will not vote for West Trek to do any development, any work, especially with an open door to $50,000. And I believe we have the capability in our own staff and reports such as Councillor Leach has said that we can determine whether or not it requires an extra set of drill holes in order to achieve it. We're lucky in this whole area, and I've learned that from Doug Grosler when we did the water committee, thing, in terms of we have the perfect area, perfect ground for septic fields and for water recharging our water table and so on and so forth. So there, if there's clay and mud and that kind of thing, obviously we've got a concern, but I don't believe we have a concern there. And what happened at Mountain View Road was just a phenomenal volume attacking it from the top. And that was unfortunate. And I pushed at the time because I still have all the files for West Trek did a desktop study, and I came back at them and said, where's your PN stamp? I want to see it. Unfortunately, I was too busy overseas because I was going to say you either do a full report or I'll report you to the ethics committee of the engineering society, because us professional engineers are to do no harm to the public. That is the prime ethic concern. So anyway, make a long story short, what your appetite is, I'm recommending that we take the first part and that the second one we pick up where Councillor Leach says, and that staff study records to determine any further requirement regarding stability adjacent to the pool. Is that okay with you folks? Mr. Taylor, do you have that wording?
I'm just going to read this back to you. And that staff study records to determine any further
requirement.
Yeah. Requirement
to
for soil
determine
stability.
Yeah, the relative instability risk. Let's put it that way. I'm confident our staff can determine that. Is that okay?
I'm just reading. Okay, and that staff study records to determine any further requirement for relative instability risk adjacent to the pool.
And you'll come to council for that too, I would assume. Mr. Deniger, is that okay?
And the last clause would be and report back to council.
That's it. Got it. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's good. And then because we'll be coming back with the results of the attempt to stop the leaking. So I think that timing will work out quite well.
Great. That's a done deal. You'll stop the leak. Let's hurry up. Get it going. We want swims to raise more money. That's right. Okay. So I need someone to move that the staff report outlining the latest efforts to address leaks in the rec center swimming pool dated June 3rd be received from information, and that staff, as was outlined by Mr. Taylor. Can you read that once again, please?
And that staff study records to determine any further requirement for relative instability risk adjacent to the pool and report back to council.
Brilliant. Will someone move that, please? Councillor Leach, second Councillor Howe. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Okay, we'll move to item 12.2, official community plan update, verbal report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right before our last meeting, we did receive our first draft of the official community plan. It didn't give me time to bring anything to that meeting, unfortunately, so I will be giving you your update today. So at the moment, we find ourselves in phase 3 of the official community plan project. In phase 1, we collected the views of the community, the vision and values. In phase 2, we analyzed the responses, which are mostly not related to land use planning as much as tangible change in implementation projects, which isn't unusual. I would hope that a biologist wouldn't make me express my concerns about ecology in their jargon. Similarly, we don't expect participants to speak to us in planning language. What this does allow us to do is see the end vision for the residents and develop policies and land use guidelines that will inform council's decision-making processes in order to achieve those end goals that were expressed. Phase 3 is where we put those policies back out to the public to see if we got it right or missed anything. I have been extremely satisfied with the document that our team at Modus Consulting has put together for us. I've worked in many other towns with OCPs done by consultants, and I found that many of those documents to be cookie cutter OCPs, with basically any town name being interchangeable. What has made me excited about this document is clearly based off of received feedback. The team put some real energy into crafting policies that were realistic for Lillooet, and more importantly, they made the documents accessible. And what I mean by that is that many OCPs I've worked with, I would describe as word soup, with policies buried in paragraphs of filler. This document, starting with section 4, clearly and visually lays out land use provisions and moves on to itemized policy statements that directly relate to the goals identified out of phase 1. It is perhaps one of the more readable and user-friendly OCPs that I have worked with. To date, we have held 4 pop-ups around town, most successfully at the farmers market and in front of the post office. However, we were also at the rec center and outside of Bilo for 2 of those days just before the long weekend. We've also held 2 stakeholder workshops, one on Monday the 25th and one on Monday the 31st, both in May, to solicit feedback from some of the specific special interest groups who gave us some very thoughtful group responses during phase 1. I won't list all the groups right now, but you can find them all listed on part 2 of the OCP under acknowledgements. This phase 3 is generally where we start to hear more passionate feedback as there is something tangible to read and comment on. Especially when there's a policy or land use designation that doesn't speak to the feedback that one gave in the first phase. So I'd like to remind everyone that this is a community plan, which means that we need to consider everyone's vision on a wide range of topics, which means that a significant number of topics will be an amalgam and compromise of the feedback we received. To give you an idea of the process moving forward, once we have collected the feedback during this phase, which we are doing through the end of the day today, actually, we will assess any common items and, if necessary, redraft portions of the document and produce a new draft. The plan will be referred to external agencies such as the Agricultural Land Commission and the School Board, both required under the Local Government Act, before being presented to Council. Public hearing is also required to be held before 3rd reading of the plan. Anyone can currently view the plan and could complete the survey at www.lillooet.ca/OCP. And I'll take any questions on the draft plan.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Just before I open it up to you folk, I was quite surprised that we are regulated with our OCP and we have to co-join it with the regional growth strategy from the SLRD. My goodness. You know, I'll just save my comments. That's all. I just can't believe it. We're here to work for our community. Anyway, that's fine. That's what I implore you, councillors, please, and I'm doing the same, is that, you know, it's difficult. There are a number of people in this community that should be looking at this OCP, and I believe that Kevin and the group have done a phenomenal job in this virtual time, and getting a lot of the feedback, but I feel we want more. You councillors know which ones. Please engage them. Tell them I've done it. I'm making paper copies and I'm giving it to certain individuals that I know, say, listen, read this. I want you to make comment, because you're going to see once we pass it, you know, a year or so later, say, oh my God, well, you had a chance to input it, you know, put up or shut up type of thing. But you guys know the number of different peoples, and it shouldn't all only be organizations, it should be individuals, and say, here, please review that and please make some comments on it. I just implore you to do that. Yes, questions for Mr. Taylor. Who's first? No. Well done, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Make sure it's aligned with the regional growth strategy.
It is absolutely a requirement, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 12.3, permissive tax exemption policy and supporting documents.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is coming out of the Committee of the Whole from, I believe it was May 17th, where we did present the permissive tax exemption policy. There have been no changes since that, as there wasn't much in the way of direction to do so. But I will address an item that I didn't answer particularly eloquently at that meeting. I believe Councillor Weeb asked the question about the duration of exemption. The specific item says tax exemptions under section 224 will be applied every 1 year unless a bylaw specifies a longer term. The term cannot exceed 10 years under section 224A of the community charter. Councillor Weeb, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your concern was you weren't interested in 10-year extensions. Council is able to, with this policy, issue anything between a 1 year to a 10-year extension. It could be 3 years, it could be 4 years, and you could decide how long for each individual it needed to be done. And that would have to be done as part of the permissive tax exemption bylaw that needs to be passed in order to grant these exemptions. Limiting that to say 1 year or 3 years or 4 years in this policy won't preclude council from still being able to issue a 10-year exemption, because that is that is in the act. So we could change the policy to say a shorter period of time, but that would not bind council to that period of time. It is just a policy, and the act will continue to override it. So the best practice is to parrot the legislation. But if you do want to suggest a change to council before adopting the policy, you are able to have that conversation. Other than that, there haven't been any changes from Committee of the Whole, so I will open it up to questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any comments, questions from council? Councillor Leach.
I just have a curious question, and it's not actually super related to the actual policy, so I apologize. But at the very back, you've given us a list of applications received, and it seems like it's been a lot less than in previous years. Is that because of the new matrix?
Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong. This is just an example sheet, isn't it, of what it would look like? Yeah. So we took some examples from previous applications, just put it together so that you would see what the worksheet would look like when it does come to council after the 31st of July.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
No worries.
Any further comments, questions? There seeing none. Would someone please move that permissive tax exemption policy CO.05 bracket C be adopted? Who moves? Councillor Weeb. Second. Councillor Howe. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Councillor Hoppel. Thank you. Thank you. So move on to item 12.4, 2020 annual report. Ms. LaRue, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, through the mayor, the annual report, which, as you all know, is a requirement by the community charter. It really just puts together all of the other reports that you've had to read over the last 4 or 5 months or so, puts them all into one. We have had it advertised in the newspaper and on our website for well over the 14 days that were required. And at this point in time, I've received no questions or submissions from the public. I would ask if Mr. Taylor could see if there's any questions or submissions from the public tonight.
If there's anyone in attendance who would like to address the annual report, please turn on your camera now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So thank you. With no questions or submissions from the public, we do just require that council approve that annual municipal report for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Aside from that, if council has any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. LaRue. I think the mayor's report was absolutely brilliant. The only problem is that he neglected to profusely thank the council for their work throughout the year. So I commit and promise that next year's report, I'll do a double at the beginning of the report and at the end. Thank you. Any questions, comments from council? No, it was a good year, folks. And okay, Councillor Huffel, yes.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I agree with you. But Ms. LaRue, I think that this is such a lovely report to look through. It's inviting, and I really enjoyed looking through it. Thank you. Good work.
Yeah. No, I feel it's something that council and staff can be proud of. I think good work. Great work done. Thank you, guys. Any further comments? Okay, I need someone to move that council consider the District of Lillooet's 2020 annual municipal report in conjunction with submissions and questions from the public, and that council approve the 2020 annual municipal report as presented. Who moves? Councillor Howe, second Councillor Leach. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Councillor Wiebe? Thank you. Carried. Thank you, Ms. LaRue. We'll go to item 12.5. Policies to support bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. Mr. Royke.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, councillors. Thank Mrs. G for developing the report for me, and I will present it today. Coming to you with actually 3 policies, and these are to help support our bylaw notice enforcement bylaw that you had passed earlier in the year. The 3 policies are the bylaw enforcement policy. This provides a protocol for addressing bylaws related concerns and working proactively with residents to achieve compliance with municipal bylaws. This policy provides general guidelines for staff in dealing with bylaw related complaints within the municipality in an effort to treat all residents fairly and equally. Next is the screening officer's policy. So the intent of the screening officer's policy is to govern the discretionary decision-making of the screening officer under the Local Government and Bylaw Enforcement Act, the Bylaw Notice Enforcement Regulations, and the District of Lillooet Bylaw Enforcement Bylaw. With respects to canceling, disputing notices, confirming a disputed notice, entering into compliance agreements with the bylaw notice disputants, and setting aside the bylaw notice debt. The third policy that we want to bring forward to you as well for consideration is the adjudication registry policy. This provides guidance in the operation of the District of Lillooet bylaw notice enforcement dispute adjudication registry, otherwise known as the registry. The registry provides a transparent and impartial process whereby disputants may challenge a bylaw notice issued by the District of Lillooet The adjudication registry policy outlines the details in the process of disputing the bylaw notice and provides information about how disputants can appeal the adjudicator's decision with the Supreme Court. With this as well, we are wanting for your consideration to appoint the corporate officer and the deputy corporate officer as the screening officers. So these documents are the supporting information. I think they lay out quite nicely and are clarified to the public and to staff on how the new bylaw system works. And yeah, I think we've worked hard on them, and I think they're looking pretty good. Not to say that they may need some tweaking down the road, and we will always do that and look and update those as time goes on here. Yeah, I was wondering if Ms. G has anything to add. Nothing to add. And if there's no other, if anybody would like to ask questions, I would
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Oiki. Comments, questions from council? There being none, thank you. Good work, Mr. Oiki and Ms. G. So I need someone move that the bylaw notice enforcement policy PRO2C be adopted and that the screening. Mr. Taylor, should I do each individually? Can I do them all at once?
You can do them all at once, but we will record them as individual motions.
Okay. That the bylaw notice enforcement policy PRO2C be adopted. Number 2, that the screening officer policy PRO3C be adopted and that the corporate officer and deputy corporate officer be appointed as screening officers. And 3, that the adjudication registry policy PRO4C be adopted. Who will move? Councillor Wiebe, second Councillor Howe. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Oiki. Thank you, Ms. G. We'll move to bylaws and resolutions. 13.1, a bylaw to amend the bylaw, notice enforcement bylaw. Next year, we'll add another bylaw in there.
It didn't sound as ridiculous in my head, Mr. Mayor. This item is being considered in conjunction with item 13.2, the building bylaw 2021-006 building fees and building forms. But we're doing this one separately because it's also got some housekeeping amendments in there to the recently adopted bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. This bylaw will be updating the penalties for building infractions to the current best practices, as well as some minor revisions to some of the schedules for typos and whatnot that we found in some of the adopted schedules from the existing bylaw. So there's not much more to go into this, so we will open it up for questions. What I do ask is that if you have a specific question, please give us the agenda page number so that we can find the item that you are referring to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any comments, questions from council on a bylaw to amend the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw? Councillor Hoffel.
Thank you. Through the mayor, got a question on this bylaw, page 171. 2/3 of the way down, it's got a no renovation permit. So we are doing some renovations ourselves, and I was a little bit confused on what is considered an actual renovation. So in this example, okay, go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, it's going to be a little, unfortunately, with the building inspector here, a little difficult to sort of answer the specific questions, but generally anything that's cosmetic would not require any sort of permit. It's when you start to get into anything structural, if you're dealing with any load-bearing walls, if you're increasing the size of the lintel around a window. Most window replacements, even if you're not replacing the size, do need a permit now, just because there are new R-value requirements that have to do with the step code now coming in and being implemented. Basically anything that affects the structure or the exterior envelope of the building. So if you're changing your siding, it's a renovation, but that does affect the building envelope and does require a permit. But if you're changing the tiles in your bathroom.
So, and that, okay, that was kind of my question, and it was to do with a window, right? I mean, I just don't think a lot of people realize that if you replace a window, that you're going to need a permit, and then to turn around and find them, you know, and I mean, who's to say it's a renovation? If it's a broken window, what's the difference between a replacing a window and a renovation of a window? You know, I mean, I know it's picking at things, but I don't want to see us doing this money grab either. I don't want it to look like a money grab, and I feel there's no renovation permit for a lot of reasons could look like that.
And I do understand that. Going back to when we first talked about the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, it is always our intention to seek voluntary compliance, and that issuing a ticket is the last resort of our enforcement action. So if it was brought to the district's attention through any method that someone was doing something that would require a permit, the very first step is to reach out, inform them that they require a permit, give them the reasons for the permit, and then give them a reasonable amount of time to meet the requirement. There are also is flexibility and exemptions throughout the BC Building Code that does allow for a certain level of grandfathering in certain instances. And I'm sorry, I don't have an exact example for you right now. But a lot of those exemptions do speak to the modification of existing buildings. So we need it in there if we do run into someone who refuses to at least get the permit or work with the building inspector to meet some sort of alternate solution. But it's certainly not going to be every time we see someone taking a door off the hinges, the bylaw officer is not going to show up with a ticket.
That's good to know. Thank you. And I think that we should make this public, and we pay a lot of money for that Bridge River Lillooet News, the back page. And I think that sometimes people look at that page and just blank over because a lot of it is just so repetitive. And it would be nice to take some of these issues, because seriously, we're replacing our windows and our siding, and I didn't know I needed a permit because I wasn't changing the footprint. I wasn't changing the size of the windows. So I think that we did, you know, and I don't know, I think that we should just, I know it's, you know, if people are doing a renovation, they should be, the onus is on them to ask, but the onus is also 50-50. You know, we can be a little bit more proactive in letting people know that we are changing these and that there is certain things that need a permit that somebody might not think otherwise. Thanks.
Absolutely. We will draft something up for that rear page. The reason why a permit is needed for these types of things is because the district has taken on a duty of care for all the structures in the town. And it's not necessarily for the current owners, it's for the next owners and the owners after them, knowing that when this building was constructed, the district at least did our part to ensure that it was constructed appropriately.
Good. Thank you. If I can make a suggestion, just before I'll pass on to you, Mr. Councillor Weed, but if I can make a suggestion, what I found that works really well, and obviously from a company point of view, and we are a company or a business, is a facet for communication, which starts out, did you know? I'm working with, just beginning to work with Wendy Fraser right now. I'm really excited that she's digging up all, helping me dig up all the old photos of the previous councils and mayors and staff from as far back as we can. So Mr. Taylor and Mr. Deniger are going to have to find some wall space for us to put all that up at some point in time. And I found out in just speaking with Wendy that her mother was the very first female counselor on Lillooet staff. And those are the kind of things that we can do. I think Councillor Hoffel, as you say, we got the whole back page. There should be a portion. Did you know? That usually brings people right there and they want to know what I need to know. And interesting facts like that, as well as permits and the like required. Did you know you needed a permit to change a window? And like, here's why type of thing. People will go to that and read it. It's good. Any further? Councillor Weeb, go ahead.
I'm just curious if you're doing, like Councillor Hoffel said, siding. If you're using a contractor, should the contractors not know if we need a permit, or is it still up to the property owner? Like, I'm a firm believer of when in doubt, ask. So, you know, I just.
The technical liability and responsibility is always with the property owner. However, we will also be running educational pieces and conversations with the local contractors and the general contractors and the home builders to make sure that they are also aware of the permits, because they should be as well. And it is our hope that they're going to be sort of that middleman between us and the owners, because we all speak the language and a lot of the homeowners don't. So we will make sure that the public are aware of these requirements, and we will make sure that the professional community is aware of these requirements to the best of the ability that we can.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions from council? They're hearing none. I will ask. Staff recommends that number one, that bylaw notice enforcement bylaw 2021-002, amendment bylaw 2021-020 be introduced and read a first and second time. I'll do that individually. Who will move? Councillor Hoffel, second. Councillor Leach. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Staff also recommends number two, that bylaw notice enforcement bylaw 2021-002, amendment bylaw 2021-020 be read a third time. Who will move? Councillor Howe, second. Councillor Weeb. Call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you, Ms. G. We'll move to item 13.2, building bylaw 2021-006, building fees and building forms.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did give a rather lengthy presentation on this at the committee of the whole, so I will spare you all this time. But as a reminder, this bylaw was required to be upgraded when the Building Act was brought in. We missed the deadline for that by a few years. And so this new bylaw was taken from the model building bylaw created by the Municipal Insurance Association of BC. The MIBC model bylaws are created specifically with liability mitigation in mind and in an attempt to get municipalities to adopt a more standardized model. Along with the building bylaw number 2021-006, is the fees and charges bylaw number 2021-003, amending bylaw number 1, bylaw number 2021-019. And Mr. Mayor, I think I may have gotten bylaw in there one more time than previously. And that one will update the fees of the building bylaws that we discussed at the committee of the whole meeting to bring them more in line with the adjacent communities and to help pay help to adopt a more user pay service for our building inspection services. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any comments, questions from council? Councillor Howe?
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor to Mr. Taylor. One, if we bring the fees up to 65% fee increase, that puts us at a $696 increase, which, okay, that sounds fine. However, I look at it in terms of relativity to other jurisdictions, and perhaps Kamloops hasn't raised their prices yet, but we're higher than Kamloops, and we're very close to Merritt, and their populations are incredibly more than ours, and that's a little concerning.
So the reason for and it's 0.65%, not 65%. So I just don't want to forget anyone listening to this. And that's only an increase of 0.15% from the existing, and that's based off of a $435,000 home, I believe. So the reason why Kamloops and Merritt have chosen to do that is because they do have that larger tax base. So the tax burden is spread out amongst over a much larger surface. So the ability for the taxpayers to subsidize the building service is not nearly as much of a hit as it would be in a town this side to provide the same level of service. So the two options are either to go to the fee-for-service model, where the individuals actually using the service pay for the service, or we do add to the tax burden, take that burden off of the user of the service and spread it out amongst the 1,500 taxpaying properties. We've opted for the fee-for-service model because there's been a general direction from council to sort of relieve that tax burden off the general property tax revenue.
Okay, thank you. And so I figured as much, and we've been through a lot of conversations, so I just needed the refresh. But the $100 an hour fee for plan revisions, that's going to that would go out to the lay homeowner as well, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that one I'm not comfortable with, and I'll explain why. So I think it was just this recent conversation about the layperson not having all the answers. Their information is only so much, and at some point, us providing a building inspector is part of the service that we provide to this community. Their level of education and experience is an added service to the community, but it's a service that we offer nonetheless. So by expecting the homeowner to have all the answers, in that they may not need a revision, seems a bit unrealistic. And so it's I don't think that we should pass that on to them. I really don't, because I don't think, I would like to think that most homeowners, when they're thinking very seriously, very critically about their renovation, it's a huge expense. So would they not consider these sorts of things? And perhaps it's just they don't know what additional information they need to provide, or things that they needed to look at they may not have known, and so there is a revision necessary once they find out. I'm not comfortable with passing that fee on to them. It's expensive enough.
Mr. Mayor, so the purpose behind, and sorry, are we looking at building permit administrative fees section 2.5 plan revision after submission to building permit?
We're looking at page 193, first paragraph. Staff are proposing that a $100 an hour fee is appropriate for plan revisions.
Yeah. So the reason behind that, and it's not a necessary fee, but when the building inspector does need to undertake to educate people who could receive that same service from the private sector, to go get their plans drawn up appropriately by someone who's actually familiar with the building code, we are delaying the approval process for other permits that have already been submitted as the building inspector takes what is not an unsubstantial amount of time to explain the code, mark up these people's plans for them. We don't have to charge for it, but in the interest of keeping our permitting process at a reasonable pace, we need some way of encouraging people to go out and get their plans drafted by a professional, submit them to us as a complete package, and then we only have to check them once. Building permit is issued and we can move on to the next one. So it's more of an encouragement to seek the professional advice that really these owner builders should be receiving, and not relying on the building inspector, who is an inspector, not an educator, although he is more than capable of it, to spend his time doing that rather than plan checking and undertaking inspections. So that was the thinking behind it. It is council's bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'll come back to you, Councillor Howe, Councillor Leach. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I got a little bit of clarity from what Jamie was saying in Kevin's answer, but I just want to, I guess, point out, I've seen a lot of owner builder declarations, I guess they're called, where they take on the general contracting and then they, you know, say they have to state like who did what and they're responsible for it. And I am in favor of this because a lot of homeowner builders are doing it to cut costs and cut corners. And that is a risk for the next person that lives in that home. And I've seen it a lot in this community. So having plans drawn up and the paperwork done, I think is in the best interest of the district, and done properly is in the best interest. So that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. I'm back to you, Councillor Howe.
I hear what Mr. Taylor is saying, and I understand what Councillor Leach is speaking to, and I see how that could be. My concern is that, you know, the cost of updating a house is increasing with the new building codes, and there's more codes coming our way through the STEP code program. So if we want people to be able to afford their homes, first of all, you know, we have a lot of people in this community who are in the service industry. You know, the average menial income is, I mean, it's what, 70, I think not even 70K per household. And that lends me to think, okay, if they're going to, if these people want to own their own home, they're going to be buying the homes that have been around for quite some time and are going to be in need, because they're the only ones that are really within their price point that are going to need renovations. And if we'd like to be able to have people purchasing these homes in the community, for community members to access home ownership, then it would be helpful to consider the cost of these small updates that they would like to do. I mean, not everything's going to be a grand renovation. Maybe it's, you know, a window, you know, changing the footprint here and there. Perhaps they need to put up new drywall. Like, it could be fixing some piping. And I just, it just seems like the cost to do these renovations just goes up and up and up and up. And eventually people just aren't going to be able to afford to renovate anymore, and they're going to stop buying those homes. They're going to have a lot of decrepit homes around, and perhaps people will buy them and bulldoze them because they have the higher incomes and the means to do it. But that doesn't really offer a lot to current residents. So I think that to consider the increasing costs to renovating, we should really consider that, especially with this fee.
Councillor Howe, if I can say, look, I think as Mr. Taylor has suggested, obviously that piece has to be there because you have individuals that will continually hound for information, free information, so on and so forth. I've known for a fact that our building inspector has done a number of, how would you say, gentle minor suggestions, and he doesn't charge for them. But I believe he requires and needs it because you get some pretty belligerent, arrogant people. And if they're going to come at us to provide a free service, go pound sand type of thing. I like the fact that I find that he's been very reasonable, and the fee doesn't have to be charged if people are being reasonable with him. But if they aren't, we have to stop it short. That's the way I feel anyway. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
I also just want to be clear. We cannot act as designers for anyone. That opens us up to a massive amount of liability. If someone who doesn't know what they're doing comes in and asks whether they need a certain type of beam or what type of nails to use, I don't know, I'm not an inspector. And then we make the suggestion, they use it and it fails, the district is liable for that. So this isn't suggesting that by charging this fee, he's going to be acting as a consultant or a designer. It's just that time that it takes to then go back and review the plans that they have to go get reviewed anyways. So it's really on the homeowners to ensure that the designers that they're choosing are annotating their plans appropriately and making sure that they've got their code references on there, rather than having a conversation with an owner builder or someone who's looking to renovate their home about what the requirements are. We do that anyways.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Okay, Councillor Howe. Oh, Councillor Hupfel, go ahead.
Through the mayor, Councillor Howe, would you be interested in making a different fee request, like, because I understand what Mr. Taylor is saying, and I understand what you're saying. I understand all the points, and maybe what the answer is to not have $100 an hour fee, but to perhaps have a lesser fee and then reevaluate, see how it goes for a year or two, and maybe come back to it.
Thank you, Councillor Hoffel. But keep in mind what Mr. Taylor says. We're not going to get into the design business. And I've seen him where he's very quick to say that makes sense, but you have to get an engineering design or an engineering drawing in order to go ahead. But you've been posed a question, Councillor Howe. What say you?
Thank you, Councillor Hopful. I appreciate the thought. No, I hear what Mr. Taylor is saying, and that makes good sense from the design perspective. That ties it up nicely for me. Thank you. So no, you know what? I'm going to leave it at the $100, and we'll just, I guess, see how the community responds to that and the feedback that we get. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Howe. Any further comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I need someone to move that the building bylaw number 2021-006 be read a first, second, and third time. And number 2, that fees and charges bylaw number 2021-003, amending bylaw number 1, bylaw number 2021-019, be read a first, second, and third time. Who will move? Councillor Weeb, second, Councillor Leach. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Councillor Hopfel. I think to me, she's frozen. Or is she frozen to the rest of you? It's carried. I'd still like her to have her piece though, but anyway. It's carried, but we're going to wait until she's back for 13.3.
Mr. Mayor, it may take her a few minutes to come back. Would you like to call another 5-minute recess?
Okay, let's do that. 5 minutes, folks. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are recording.
Thank you. We are now back in recess. We are now back from recess. Councillor Huffle, were you able to hear the resolution on 13.2?
Yes, and my vote was affirmative before I got food.
Sorry, say again?
My vote was affirmative, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Then that's carried. We'll move to 13.3, zoning bylaw amendments to permit mobile food trucks. Now, Mr. Taylor, before you start, the staff recommendation, that was from our committee of the whole. Is this just for information or do we have to act on this?
This will need to be acted on. The staff recommendation has not changed since the committee of the whole. However, the committee of the whole did make an alternate recommendation to council, so they are both before you tonight. It's pick one and go with it scenario.
So, but we have to table each one then, right? And
No.
deal with it.
No, you don't have to move the staff recommendation. It is just a recommendation. If council wishes to proceed to first, second reading and schedule a public hearing, then please only move the committee of the whole recommendation.
Yeah, I believe that was the intent of council, so I'll go directly to that. The committee of the whole, if you recall, the committee of the whole council, that the zoning bylaw 2018 number 454, amending bylaw number 2021-21 be read a first and second time, and that a public hearing be scheduled. And further, that staff give notice of the public hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. And 2, that mobile vending food truck policy PD03 (C) be received for information and considered in conjunction with the adoption of zoning bylaw 2018 number 454, amending bylaw number 2021-021. We can move it and second, put it on the table, then we'll have discussion before we vote. Who will so move? Councillor Howe, second. Councillor Wiebe. Any discussions, clarifications, comments? They're hearing none. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Don't think there was any. Okay, it's carried. Thank you. 13.3. We'll move to 13.4. A bylaw to amend the council procedure bylaw. Oh, finally. Thank you. Good. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we flew through that last one, I can tell you're tired of hearing me speak, so I'll go as quickly as possible. This is based off of the council direction to review the procedure bylaw to remove the specific date and time for council meetings, which will allow council at the end of each year to look forward into the next year and set dates and times that work for this council or any subsequent councils that may not look favorably at 7 p.m. on Monday evenings. So this is simply removing section 5, subsection 2, paragraph A, which sets the prescriptive first and third Monday of each month with the single meetings in July, as well as the 7 p.m. start time. This was advertised in the newspaper as is required under the community charter on the May 26th and June 2nd, 2021 edition, and staff are recommending that for the first 3 readings be given this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Well, were we not going to also look at like the public input 2.1 that we have to continually read that out rather than allowing it the same? And when it comes to
that was not the direction. That was
Sorry?
not the direction given for this bylaw amendment. That was something that we said we were going to look at a future full review of the bylaw. At this time, that public engagement has been dealt with by resolution, so we can't just open it up to the floor at any time now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other questions, comments from council? Councillor, you both at the same time. Councillor Wiebe.
Councillor Barb is fine. So when we revamp this or whatever, do we, when do we set, does the schedule for this year go to the end of this year? And then January, it would start a new cycle, or how does that work?
We can amend the regular meeting of schedules for this year if council would like to. Generally, it will be either the last meeting in November or first meeting in December where we will consider the meetings for the next year. Since we are going to have a little more flexibility, staff will likely bring it forward to a committee of the whole first for discussion so that you can decide how to best approach it and before it comes to council for decision.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr.
But
Taylor.
staff will need direction from council if you're looking to bring forward any amendments to this year's regular council meeting schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Councillor Howe.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Mr. Taylor, could we have that committee of the whole in, say, like October-ish? November, December gets so busy. And then we get into December or January, February, and it's a blur. So I'm just wondering, to really get our to really be present and get all our ideas out on the table, perhaps we could do this in October if that would work.
I was thinking October was going to be the most reasonable in case there are any changes we need to make before the actual council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further comments, questions, council? Councillor Wiebe.
Sorry, Mr. Taylor, I kind of glazed over at your last comment. So in order to change the time or dates of the meetings from here on, we need to do another resolution? Is that?
Yes, the meeting schedule has already been set for this year as 7 p.m. the first and third Monday with a blah, blah, blah. So in order to change that, we would need to bring forward a new schedule adopted by a resolution and then publish it publicly. It doesn't just change.
Okay, so how do we go about I would really like to make the motion that we do that.
Then at the we'll make a third recommendation that staff schedule at the next committee of the whole a discussion of amending the 2021 regular council meeting schedule to be brought forward to a future council meeting for adoption or consideration.
So does that mean we meet at 7 o'clock until that time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Good heavens. Any further questions from council?
What else you could do is, instead of going to committee of the whole, direct staff by resolution to just bring forward a new schedule to the July 12th regular council meeting, which would still be at 7 p.m. Asking for a revision of the schedule for new times for the rest of the year.
How does council feel about that? I'm inclined to want to do it. I don't want to wait so long. I want to hear from the rest of you, council. Councillor Wiebe.
Yes, that was the main reason I asked the question. Was I would like it to start sooner rather than later. And then I don't know about the day change, how anybody feels about that. It doesn't concern me too much on what day it is, but I would like an earlier time.
Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. Councillor Hoffel.
My arm looks so long now that I've got the iPad as opposed to the computer. So I agree. I'd like an earlier time, but with that, I would also like to have the agenda on Thursday after, or at 4 o'clock. And I know that that might be a part of an issue too. But I mean, if we're moving the time forward, I'm all for that. And just so that it's in the back of minds to think about for a future, that we could have the agenda a bit earlier too.
And we do make every effort to get it out as early as possible. We do often run into last minute issues. This week it was getting books back on.
Usually from the mayor, so I play a role in that as well. So I'll be more adept and more efficient.
No, that's not a problem. It's just that, you know, like if we're having the meeting at say 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever, and we're picking it up at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and we've got plans for the weekend, I just don't. I would like an extra day to have that time to just read it.
Keep in mind, sorry, Mr. Taylor, I just jump in quickly. Keep in mind, we may not be meeting on Mondays. We may be meeting on Tuesdays. Right. Staff will come at the July 12th meeting and bring us a couple of options that we can look at, and then we can discuss it in great detail there. So at least
right. I just wanted to throw one of those options out there as well. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
And I said July 12th, I meant June 21st. I thought we were already at the end of June for some reason. So we will bring forward. What I would suggest at this point is that we keep the meetings on the Mondays, just because we all know what that is. I presume we'll look at changing the times to 5 o'clock. I can accept nods for that. You know, what time were we considering?
Councillor Howe?
Well, assuming, thank you, through the mayor, to council and Mr. Taylor, assuming that we're going to get back to doing public meetings, and we would like to offer the option for public to be able to attend. Most people get off at about 5 o'clock. That doesn't really allow them the time to get there and participate, which is something that we really would like. So perhaps 6 could work, maybe 5:30. I think we originally chose 7, or 7 was originally chosen, so it allowed everybody to eat as well, work, eat, and then get into a meeting. I think 6 would be appropriate. It allows for people to get there.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Howell. Councillor Leach.
I think we're all over the place, and we need to have that committee of the whole and have this discussion. Honestly, and not tonight at the end of this meeting is not the appropriate time. Sorry, guys.
We do have a committee of the whole on June 21st. I know that I committed to not presenting something at committee of the whole and then bringing it for decision that evening. But that's generally for some of our larger bylaws. If council's amenable, we can discuss it at the committee of the whole, draft it up very quickly, and then bring it as a late item to that June 21st regular council meeting for consideration, if that works.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Howe, Councillor Hoffeld, you're next.
What time does that committee of the whole start?
The committee of the committee of the whole starts at 5. So what I'm going to suggest is that you leave this with me and Kimberly. We will take a look at the schedule. We will come with a suggestion. We will throw it to the wolves. You're the wolves, and we will doctor it up for the meeting that evening.
Okay. Any other comments from council? We have that straight? Maybe? Okay. I will look at. I need someone to move that the council procedure bylaw 2017 number 450 amendment bylaw 2017-018 be introduced and read a first and second time. And number 2, that council procedure bylaw 2017 number 450 amendment bylaw 2021-018 be read a third time. And number 3, and that staff bring a new schedule to our committee of the whole on June 21st for council consideration. Is that wording sound good to you, Mr. Taylor, and the rest of council? Can you accept that? Okay, who will so move? Councillor Wiebe, second Councillor Leach. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Carried, and I thank you all. Work in progress, item 14.1. Any questions, comments from work in progress? Okay, I need someone to move that the work in progress as of June 3rd, 2021 be received for information. Councillor Wiebe. Second, Councillor Leach. Call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you, council. No notice of motion. We'll move to the report from the mayor. And on May 20th, I attended the vaccine roundtable with Interior Health. And May 25th, I had discussions with Mayor Polden of Lytton regarding primary health care for Lillooet and Lytton. Also, general discussions with Ms. Grosler regarding our clinic and some of the doctors and the like. What I intend to do in that regard is on June 9th, we have a meeting with Interior Health and the health players here in this of this region to listen to what Interior Health will have in terms of going forward. I intend to talk to each one of you in one-on-one discussions before that meeting. So I'm gleaning what your concerns and what you hear and see and hear on the ground. And obviously, Councillor Wiebe, in terms of her meetings in Kamloops regarding the Interior Health. On May 27th, the mayor's vaccine roundtable with Interior Health, and that's when they rolled out, I think it was on the 25th, the 4-step criteria with the public health order guidance in terms of opening up carefully and slowly the restart plan for summer 2021. So we got step 1, and I'm not going to read it out because everybody's got it. It's on our website, and we're looking at June the 15th for step 2. So cross fingers that we'll be continuing to make progress there. I have a call in with Interior Health and Dr. de Villiers. I want to speak with him about attracting doctors here. I know he's with the public health and also where the modeling is going with Interior Health, or let's say BC Public Health, in terms of vaccinations versus antibodies and immunities and herd immunities. We hear so many numbers that are coming at us, especially on the media. And as far as I'm concerned, they don't mean a whole heck of a lot. But what we got to know is they can give us a bit more information, especially when it comes to our area. And what's disturbing from my perspective is that very fortunate we don't have fatalities due to COVID, but we certainly do due to mental health and overdose. And as far as I'm concerned, as a community, that's where I want and need help. And I'm sure you agree with me. The amount of intensity that's being spent on, us as mayor and councillor and staff regarding vaccinations and COVID, great, all good. But for a little community our size, in 1 week, we lost 3 people. Come on, guys. So I'm intending to push back, and I will contact you individually for more boilerplate and information that you have, as well as what you get off the street. And I'll be pushing it. On May the 31st, I attended the Cadet Annual Review virtually. That was quite an experience. There were 85 people on it. It was for BC, all of BC, and a number of our Lillooet cadets got awards. And I thought they did a tremendous job. I was initially gone into that virtual Zoom meeting, but whoever was running it, the videos and the photos and the music and the like was very, very professionally done. Hopefully next year they'll be able to do it in person. On June the 4th, I attended a teleconference with Minister Osborne regarding the BC restart. Dr. Brian Emerson was involved as well. And they talked about amending the procedure bylaw to continue virtual meetings, just to give you a heads up. A lot of the mayors, this is all the Sea to Sky, which we're involved in. A lot of mayors are seeking guidance for large outdoor events. And they're coming, they feel, within the step process. The Mayor's Vaccines Roundtable with IHA are on the same date, June the 4th. They're arranging mobile clinics for vaccinations and will release these routes shortly. And I'm not sure. I tried to determine whether they're going to be happening in Lillooet. I wasn't able to determine that yet. Throughout the week, general discussions, many regarding the approach to the clinic closure in Lillooet. And we're meeting on June the 9th, as I said, and I will be lobbying you for information before that meeting. Councillor Leach mentioned to me that she heard or saw some information regarding CN Rail, and we're hoping that we can get some action and activity coming through our line this summer. We don't know, and we're going to pursue that with CN Public Relations, and it's difficult to get their attention. And I intend to in the next few days, and I'll keep you guys posted on that. That's it for me. And Councillor Hopple.
Thank you. So mostly I've been working with Lori Reimer and Vera Bussey with the Historical Society applying for a grant. The grant we learned about, I think it was Monday. So we spent Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, part of Friday, Sunday, and this morning working diligently on this grant that was submitted today. And we're looking for supplies and funding to update the museum so that we can open it back, hopefully, well, next year when the buses are back and the tourists come back and everybody else. So the grant funding, we should find out if we receive it at the end, towards the end of July. So I'm really hopeful. I think that Lori Reimer is an awesome grant writer, and we are so lucky to have her. And Mrs. Bussey has worked so hard for this as well. So really happy to be a part of this. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention was along with what Mayor Bussey had said about the COVID vaccination clinic update, there is, they did change programs. My understanding is they changed programs halfway through. So if you were vaccinated before March 31st, you need to phone or go online to make an appointment for your second shot. If you were vaccinated at the Mass Clinic in April at the rec center, you will or should be notified by email this week. If you've not received an appointment, phone, call, or email by Monday, you should be calling 1-833-838-2323 or go online to get vaccinated and make an appointment. So again, if you were before March 31st, you need to phone and make that appointment. If you were at the vaccination clinic held at the rec center, they should be contacting you this week. And the next mass vaccination clinic in Lillooet for the second shot is scheduled for June 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hopple. Before we move on to the next one, Mr. Taylor, I think we're going to go past the 10 o'clock. Should we do a resolution? I don't want to break into somebody's report before, in order to achieve that. So do we need a resolution?
If you would like to make a resolution at this point instead of interrupting, that would be appropriate.
Yeah. Will someone please move that we continue this meeting past the 10 o'clock to 10:15? Councillor Hopful, second Councillor Wiebe. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Okay, thank you. Tuesday, May 25th was the first class of the Resilient Civic Leadership Program. The Thursday, 27th, Tuesday, June 1st, and Thursday, June 3rd was a continuance of these classes. I thought about how to best explain this program. I would say that it's inductive learning. It has been so much more than just facts and history and memorizing of dates and names. It's been a process of self-introspection and exploration, with the purpose of better understanding ourselves as humans and as leaders. So far, as a group and as individuals, we have dissected and applied concepts like the value of every life, secular ethics. We've learned tools for ethical mindfulness and emotional awareness, and worked on self-compassion. And to some, you know, these terms, these concepts sound very sort of airy-fairy, right? Like, oh, what is this? You know, it's all about, you know, personal growth. Well, yes, exactly. Because as leaders, we have to grow personally. You know, it's becoming more and more apparent now just how toxic many council chambers are becoming. And not just in BC, not just in Canada, but around the world, and how that trickles into our communities. So this coursework is about better understanding ourselves and how we show up to the table as leaders, so that we may change the way that we interact with one another and change the discourse, so that we may set a better example for councils to come, but also for the community in terms of expectation of how a council they'd like to see function. Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been a lot of tears, and it's been a lot of laughter. And it's been a beautiful amount of sharing, a surprising amount of sharing. And I really was not expecting that. You just don't expect that from other leaders. Usually we're a little bit more guarded, you know, it's bureaucratic. But now in this particular forum, I find that that the facilitator provides a level of, she holds a space where we actually feel comfortable. And I really hope that after going through all of this, that level of comfort and holding of space for communicating, that's going to come from like a heart space as well, which is really weird to say at this table, will be presented as well, and that we can do that. We can have those conversations and still be, you know, emotionally intelligent and rational about how we go about those conversations. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the changes that are going to come from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Well done. Councillor Leach.
Great. So just to add a little bit on to what Councillor Howe said. So yeah, I'm in attendance of the Resilient Civic Leadership Program. And on our worksheets, it's actually titled as Compassionate integrity training. And out of all of it, I'm most intrigued to listen about not only other communities and other issues that councillors and mayors and staff, there's staff in the course as well, that are faced, and how, I don't know how to explain it, it's how we discuss it and overcome challenges, and to actually know that we're not alone in feeling some of the feelings that we get being in this seat. So it's just really interesting. There's still 4 more weeks. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to learn. I really like the connections that I'm making so far in it, and I think that that's going to go a long way as well. So yeah, I'm not going to go much more into that, but thank you, Councillor Howe, for talking about it. On May 27th, I think it was the 27th, maybe it was the 28th, I'm not too sure. This couple weeks has been a bit of a blur for me. I did go down to the Friendship Center and attend the ceremony they had for the residential school findings. I wasn't able to stay too long because I did have to work that afternoon, but that was hard. That was hard, holding back tears, and I'm really lucky that not only my partner and my son were able to come with me, but Councillor Wiebe and Mayor Bussey were able to come as well. I thought it was really important that we show up. I am also participating in the Participation Action Challenge that the Volunteer Connect has put out in the community. There's a big write-up in the paper last week, I believe it was about. So if you have, Apple Health or Fitbit, it's really easy to sync what you do during the day into the Participation Challenge app. So Lillooet is competing against the country for $100,000, and we're doing pretty well. So log on, sync your apps, and get moving. And then, as Mayor Bussey said, there's rumors of some rail stuff happening. We do know that the Rocky Mountaineer is coming back, and I just wanted to remind the public that there are still workers out on the track, whether they are local workers or contractors, and it is very imperative that we continue to promote safety when they're out there. It is not a place for jogging, walking your dog, and it is still private property and it's still trespassing. So be mindful of that. I know that some of the workers have had some close calls, whether it's in the patrol trucks or machinery. You guys you don't know what's coming around the corner. So please, it is not a walking trail. I know it would be great, but please stay off them. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. Councillor Wiebe.
Good evening. I don't know what I can add to this resilient leadership, civic leadership program that we're doing. It has turned out to be absolutely nothing like I thought it was going to be. I was thinking, oh my God, what have I signed up for? Sit in another workshop, blah, 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 blah. We've made some friends, we've made some connections, like the other two councillors said, we've had debates, we've laughed, we've cried, we've had breakout rooms, and it's amazing. The very first one we did, I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one. I think the first one was basically like a meet and greet and get to know where everybody was from and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking maybe it was the second one, and some of the stories, which we did have to sign non-disclosure things, but I came out of there and I was actually kind of chuckling, thinking, wow, we don't have it so bad here. Because we do have a pretty compatible bunch of people at the table, and we have great staff, and we always are going to have a little bit of conflict, but it was just compared to some of the things, I'm like, boy, we seem to be able to sit down, work it out, and get on with it. I know we've had some hurt feelings over the months and this, that, and the other thing, and feeling a little left out, or where do I fit, or whatever. But it's been really good. And then the timing with the residential school stuff, we've really gotten into some deep dialogues over that. And other than those ones, on May 26th, I did SLRD. A lot of that was, we did have a delegation again from the geothermal people about using the Garibaldi volcanic stuff there for heating houses and whatnot. It was very informative, but most of the SLRD right now is like our council meetings, doing a lot of bylaw housekeeping things. And then I missed part of the committee of the whole because I really felt like the resiliency workshop was doing more for me than the committee of the whole. I did tune in for the last part of it, kind of jumped out of one into the other right away. On May 28th, I think it was a Friday, so like Jen, I'm not sure if it was 27th or 28th, but I think it was the 28th. And I did go down with Jen and her family to the drum circle. I really appreciate them picking me up and dropping me off. And the stories broke my heart and really opened a lot of stuff for me that was already partially open due to the residential school stories. And at one point there, when I looked over and Jen's little guy was sound asleep almost on her shoulder, and it just, all I could see was visions of somebody coming and ripping him away. And it was just, from there on, I went downhill drastically and started having flashbacks and all kinds of things over the weekend. Yeah, it wasn't good. Like none of that stuff is. So trauma just affects you for years and years and years and a lifetime, really. On June 1st, I did a Silga. We just kind of did a brief debrief from our AGM. Things are firming up a little bit for Salmon Arm for the 2022 convention. And I believe it's going to be at the Prestige Hotel. And they just sound like such a fun group. I'm sure that coming out of COVID, if we have a real live convention, it's really going to be something. I'm pretty sure Salmon Arm is going to step up and really put this on. And on June 5th, I had talked to the Bridge River Indian Band and asked if we could take one of their trucks to do the truck convoy into Kamloops Residential School. They thought about it, they appreciated it, gave us the go-ahead. We had a few little laughs about this orange flag that was going to go on the truck. So that didn't turn out to be a flag because we couldn't figure out any way to put this on. Thanks to Councillor Leach, she painted a medicine wheel on it, and Ken kind of mounted it on whatever that rack is behind the truck. I have no idea what you call that thing. And off we went. We met with the Williams Lake truckers. A lot of First Nation loggers coming out of Williams Lake and 100 Mile. Met them in Cache Creek. And somebody must have let the scale guys know because they all took the day off, which was great. Seeing as we all had to pull in there to do brake checks. And from there, you could see probably about 50, 60 trucks coming from Merritt that we just kind of all intermingled along the highway. And then there was trucks from Kelowna that came from the other direction, and we all met at Highway 5. And there again, it was amazing, the reception. The reception was amazing. There were people from Lillooet that were there. There were people from Lillooet that couldn't go because they can't. They've been there, done that, can't go there again. They appreciated us going. I think there's some videos out there somewhere. But like I say, the people on the side of the road and on the overpasses and the support for this is absolutely amazing. And I don't want anybody to do it as a sightseer, but on Highway 5, right before you turn into the residential school, they have 215 crosses on the right-hand side of the road. And they have appropriate children's outfits on them. And I can honestly say from that moment, I don't remember anything. I was just an emotional wreck and a glaze of tears. And like I say, the response, these people are so forgiving and caring. And, you know, they had the drummers out there from, I don't even know how many bands. I'm sure it wasn't just Kamloops, because it was absolutely amazing. It was very, very emotional. We never got to park and get out, which I thought we were going to do, but I mean, I guess there's rules and regulations in everything you do. So we kind of just did a drive through and then back out, and to see the trucks still coming in after we were, it was phenomenal. What an amazing group of people to put that together in such a short time to show support. And I believe there were motorcycle groups there as well that came in afterwards. There's a couple of runners that are doing to fund for the residential school to get some support going for, you know, whatever the Indigenous groups can do. And it's just really hit a spot with me that I'm thinking it's making me a softer person, and I don't know if Mr. Bussey wants to hear that. Me and my cutting ways, I will still have a voice, and I think I'm going to have more of a voice for the people that didn't have a voice, or that had a voice but really weren't listened to. And it's just given me a whole different perspective to say things, get the word out there, but to be mindful of how you say it and how hurtful things can be. And yeah, that's it for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. Kudos on you folk for participating and supporting our Statliam neighbors, and through this very trying time. It's trying for everyone. And also well done on your resiliency works. I've had personal experience with that, so I know exactly what you folks are going through. And it's so encouraging and good to hear that you're benefiting from it personally. That's very, very important. So yeah, Councillor Wiebe, I still expect the cutting, and we appreciate all the diversity that we've got amongst our council. I just think it makes us all on a collective basis a little bit better, because I know that all our hearts are in the same spot, and that is for our community and for our people. There's not one of you out there that I see that isn't that. And I think we're 99% there if you've got people like that and people like you that care for our community. Okay, we'll move on. CAO report.
I had a few mundane items, but I don't think I will bother with them after this sort of a conversation. I'm very proud to be working with this council, and you're right, there's many terrible examples out there. You're a high functioning, very thoughtful council, and I appreciate that. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Deniger. We'll move on to meeting being open to questions from the media and public. Hearing there are none, I'll move on to 2021 adjourning of the meeting. I need someone to move that the June 7th, 2021 regular council meeting be adjourned. Who moves? Councillor Weeb, second, Councillor Howe. Call the question. Those in favor? Thank you so much, Council. I know it was an intense night for you as well as for staff. I'm proud of you all and I'm proud to be working with you. Well done. We're forging ahead. Have a good night.